So please let's take a seat. We'll start in 30 seconds. Ka do shpresoj se kam dikush. Faleminderit, atëherë fillojmë. We shall start. My name is Petri Selimi, unë jam Petri Selimi, drejtori ekzekutiv I Fondacionit të Mileniumit të Kosovës. Po vjen mirë këtu që janë dikon rreth sapo shoh 100 aktivistë, përfaqësues të OQ-ve, organizatave të ndryshme që kanë qenë pjesë e rrugtimit tonë të DigDataKosovo, apo sfidës së hapjes së të dhënave, një projekt që kemi filluar tash 4 vjet në Fondacionin Mileniumit. MFK-ja është entiteti ligjor që ka implementuar projektet e MCC-s apo të financuara nga MCC-ja në Kosovë. Projektet kryesisht kanë qenë në fushën e energjisë, ndoshta keni pa shpallët tona si në programin Women Energy, gratë energji, stipendionet për vajza, projektet e praktikës, por edhe investimet në eficiencë energjetike, kullat europiane tash që renovohen, zgjerimi I rrjetës apo fillimi I matjes në termokas, po projekte të ndryshme në fushën e energjisë. Po, një pjesë të fokusit ton, apo një pjesë e vëmendjes këto 4 vitet e fundit të implementimit të projekteve ka qenë në sfidën apo në pyetjen se si mund të arrisim transparencën e së paku disa institucioneve me interes publik. Tash transparenca është koncept I gjerë, puna me publik edhe në hapjen të dhënave, po ashtu është punë e cila I takon më shumë institucioneve. Por në disa fusha që kanë qenë interes edhe për programin tonë, kemi konsideruar që megjithatë mund të krijohet një urë lidhëse në mes të prodhimit të dhënave dhe hapjes të dhënave dhe konsumit apo përdorimit të dhënave të hapura. Shpesh kemi pasur institucione që nuk kanë refuzuar të hapin dhënat, po I kanë futur në PDF në një faqe dikun website pa ndonjë kujdes se kush I përdor apo a mund t'i përdor të skenuar në PDF. Domethënë atë ka qenë roli jonë shumë I thjeshtë. Të ndihmojnë që të jenë në faqet e Excelit apo në formate tjera të përdorshme nga shqiptarët, të përdorshme nga aktivistët. Në raste tjera, por do të investojmë në hardware apo software që të bëjmë solucione teknologjike që të hapin dhënat. Për shembull, Instituti Hidrometeorologjik I Kosovës ka përfituar një rrjet modern të stacioneve për matjen e ajrit, por edhe për projektimin traditor të ndotjes së ajrit që pastaj kanë ndihmuar shoqërinë civile, sektorin privat të përdorin të dhënat për të ofruar solucione se si të përmirësohet kualiteti I ajrit. Kanë qenë 4 valë të ndryshme, 4 fusha të interesit ku kemi ftuar përfaqësues të shoqërisë civile, të mediave, të sektorit privat të ofroj solucione të vogla, po që kanë pas mundësinë e zgjerimit në fushën e të dhënave të punësimit dhe arsimit, në fushën e të dhënave të ndotjes së ajrit apo ajrit të pastër, në fushën e energjisë, se tash momentanisht kjo projekti I fundit që implementohet në fushën e të dhënave të drejtësisë. Sot do të jetë një program I gjerë, ku kemi pa disa nga shembujt më të mirë të implementimit të këtyre projekteve. Dhe do të dëgjoni nga disa prej ekspertëve apo liderëve të fushës, qoftë nga Amerika, live me një format hibrid, I cili tashmë u bë I zakonshëm pas 2 vjetëve të pandemisë. Dhe po shpresojmë që ta keni një trezë, jo bashkë trezë, por një skenë të madhe, arenë të madhe të gjerë, ku të mund të kemi një debat apo një diskutim se çka tutje tash. Prandaj edhe një herë, në emër të Fondacionit Mileniumit, mas parë dëshoj të falenderoj ekipin që ka punuar I vogël, por në mënyrë shumë intensive 4 vjet e fundit me Egi dhe Genta, sidomos në implementimin e projekteve, por edhe të gjithë të tjerë që kanë qenë të përfshirë në përfundimin e një cikli shumë të rëndësishëm të aktivizmit, të inkorporimit të dhënave, teknologjisë, aktivizmit qytetar në një trekënd shumë të rëndësishëm të bashkëpunimit midis institucioneve, shoqërisë civile, donatorëve për një mënyrë të re të aktivizmit qytetar, të bazuar në të dhëna. Jo ndoshta më në akuza apo bërje me gisht se ku është faktori, po në gjetjen e solucioneve të përbashkëta se ku është zgjidhja. Prandaj edhe një herë ju falenderoj të gjithëve për pjesëmarrjen këtu, edhe pa shumë vonesë e ftoj zonën Sara Olmstad, drejtoreshën për Kosovë të MCC-s, Agencionit Federal Amerikan, të na thotë ca fjalë. So Sarah, please welcome.
Good afternoon, and thanks to everyone who's here today. It is really nice to see so many of our stakeholders, so many participants in not just the DigData program, but all of our programs. So thank you. I was listening to a podcast this morning about COVID data, a 99% invisible story about the advent of public health spreadsheets and statistics, and how data can be used to help institutions and government make decisions that that kind of the data existing alone doesn't achieve. And there's a really good quote that summarized much better than my speech today what I wanted to say, and that is, data can't talk and data can't explain itself. MCC, as many other donors often talk about the importance of data, of creating data, of measuring things, and many of our projects in the Threshold program were about this, about collecting that data, making it available, etc. But that is only a very first step in the process. The data on its own is not enough. You really need to take the next step, and this activity was focused on taking the next step of helping to explain that data. Say, so what? What does this mean? How does this compare to what we should be expecting to see, etc. So transforming data from just some numbers in a spreadsheet to something useful for decision makers and advocates. When we started talking to people in Kosovo back in 2016, when we talked about data, we heard a variety of stories. Data wasn't there, or it was bad quality, or no one used it if it was there. The post-independence kind of focus on creating watchdogs and the way data was used really created an adversarial relationship between institutions that created this data and could act on data analysis, and civil society who should be doing a lot of that analysis and helping provide additional orientation for the institutions, but instead really focus them on kind of catching bad stuff going on, whether it's actual corruption, whether it's inefficiency, whether it's incompetence. And so we saw that led to a real reticence to release data and created this distrust between these parties. So this activity was really our small attempt, and I think Petra said this was like a very small project initially, and I don't think we had any grand expectations for it, but really a small attempt to try to model some positive collaborative relationships and partnerships between civil society and government, and create a culture of demand for data, and as demonstrated by actual analysis being carried out by our partners and the broader civil society. So I think we achieved that, and I think you'll hear today about some really good partnerships that have been achieved through this program that transform information as kind of analyzed by these independent actors to really help achieve government goals and what should be Kosovo community goals. So I'm glad to be here today. I'm glad to celebrate the successes and the challenges that we've seen in the course of this program. And I will turn it over to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Indeed, there's been a 6-year journey. You came with a small child who could not speak, and now that child is a healthy Kosovar American girl going in a kindergarten here and learning about data from her mom's scientist. You're using, I'm going to take a photo of all of you guys here because you're using hashtag DigDataKosovo across all our social media, so you're welcome to share because sharing is caring in this business. But this is a hybrid format, so we're gonna move up and down from Zoom, and our speakers online. It's an afternoon because that's when people in the United States are waking up. So Carolyn Wetzel-Chan, who is the managing director at Millennium Challenge Corporation in the United States, a critical person of support for us in implementation, in ensuring that we are in really collaborative fashion, identifying the best experiences from MCC with the best value and the best players here in Kosovo in creating this unique small intervention of Open Data Kosovo. So Carolyn, welcome to Klan Arena with about now already 120-130 people who will be listening about your experience with our team and with DigDataKosovo.
Thanks so much, Patrick. It's great to be here virtually. So I have had the privilege of backstopping the Kosovo Dig Data Challenge since before the threshold program was signed in my role as a director in MCC's Human and Community Development Practice Group. And while these challenges were always labeled data challenges, it still surprised me during implementation how much work went into getting the data ready for each challenge. So that's what I wanted to talk a little bit about this morning, is that especially when we were working on the 3 challenges that use data sets from ministries in Kosovo, the aspect of the project of getting the data ready was a tough one. As you might expect, government ministries have lots of data sets. And as you might not expect, they want to share this data. Some, but many, the ones we worked with. But it takes a lot of work to structure data so others can use it, and more work to ensure it's free of personally identifiable information and entirely accurate. So imagine working in the Environmental Regulatory Office and being the person responsible to declare a data set final and actually clicking the upload button so it becomes public on the ERO website. So an unexpected and absolutely critical component of the Dig Data Challenges has been working with the government of Kosovo to make their data public and available to Dig Data grantees to use for their solutions. We realize that the will to make data public is not enough. It takes time, needing money, and expertise to make data understandable, accessible, and accurate. And it's no small thing that for a government of Kosovo institution to organize their data, prepare to publicize it, and then display it for all the world to use. So today I want to celebrate the government of Kosovo institutions that did the hard work of making their data public, and all the individual consultants and government employees that painstakingly shifted through rows and rows on Excel spreadsheets, organizing, quality checking, and enabling the government to finally hit that upload button and share their data. Kosovo government institutions sharing their data really enabled the Kosovo Dig Data Challenges to happen. So I want us to celebrate today the Ministry of Environment and Spatial Planning, the Kosovo Environmental Protection Agency, the Kosovo Hydrometeorological Institution, the National Institute of Public Health, the Ministry of Health, the Energy Regulatory Office, the Kosovo Agency of Energy Efficiency, Legal Aid, the Kosovo Judicial Council, and the Kosovo Prosecutorial Council. Thank you so much. Thank you, and over to the next speaker.
Thank you very much, Carolyn. In Albania, very quickly, kjo puna e institucionet Kosovës së qeverisë, edhe puna që është bë jo vetëm në projektet që ne implementu bëndën, apo në hapin e projekteve, kjo background-i mrapa, me shti për shembull Agjencionin Regulativ Kosovës apo ERON të rrymës me i shpalos të gjitha dënat e prodhimit të rrymës, është punë efektive që ndihmon të gjitha ato që do të studiu të gjitha trendet e çmimit, e konsumit, ai puna që bëhet për shembull në institucione të tjera si në drejtësi, që bëhet tash në hapjen e të gjitha dënave të sistemit digital të drejtësisë, ku shifet se pse disa tendenca për shembull krimin ndaj grave në Gjakov janë ndryshe pi aty në Prishtinë, si pi pjesës të prokurorëve ashtu edhe të gjykimit. Këto janë të gjitha komplete datasetet të rëndësishme që nuk janë vetëm për këtë projektin tonë që kemi qenë këtu nëse bashku, por kanë efekte shumë të gjërë dhe shumë të gjanë për një gjeneratë të tërë që vijnë ashëm të studiusve, të biznesmenve, të atyre që bën data mining, të atyre që do në gjithë solucione në dotit arit si pas trendeve të kalume, në reforma në drejtësi si pas trendeve të prezente. Pra, Caroline e foli për këtë pjesë shumë të rëndësishme të punës që bën në hapën e kryemëdhënave. Tash është një pjesë e dy folësve, two keynote speakers, important folks who have been working from the highest levels of international involvement and international development. I invite James Gerard, who is the Managing Director of the Threshold Programs in the Millennium Challenge Corporation, to join us from Washington, D.C., another of morning speakers in the United States and afternoon speakers in Kosovo. James?
Thank you, Petra. Just checking, making sure everyone can hear me.
We can hear you, and we can see you as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Petra, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is James Gerard, and I manage the Threshold program at Millennium Challenge Corporation. I had the pleasure of being in Pristina for the award ceremony of the first Big Data Challenge, and it's my distinct honor to join you today virtually to celebrate the conclusion of Big Data. I'm here in person to see you all. Let me start by thanking you, Petra, as CEO. I also want to thank our MCC Country Director, Sarah Olmstead, and the full MFK and MCC teams that have contributed so much to this important and innovative activity, as you have all just heard. A key focus of the Threshold partnership between MCC and Kosovo has been promoting transparency and accessibility of governmental data. Now that the Threshold program is coming to a close in September, my hope is that the government of Kosovo institutions will continue making timely and accurate data accessible to the public in the future, and that you will continue your work of engaging with that data and translating it into useful information. As we have seen, access to information is critical for democracy. It allows citizens to make informed decisions, fosters civic dialogue on important issues, and keeps governments accountable. I want to commend and congratulate our Dig Data grantees, you, for your creativity and perseverance. Over the past 5 years, 21 grantees have developed innovative solutions that leverage governmental data related to the labor force, energy, air quality, and the judicial process. I also want to highlight that these 21 grantees were selected out of 100 grant applications. We did not anticipate receiving so many high-quality applications, and I believe that this speaks to a culture in Kosovo that values transparency and it is engaging with data in innovative and creative ways. At the Millennium Challenge Corporation, data transparency is a key value. We're committed to both publishing data and to making it accessible to the public, because data that isn't formatted well or isn't machine readable or is of poor quality is simply not as useful. As an example of our commitment to transparency, MCC publishes all of the independent evaluations of our programs, both the good and the not so good. We don't just publish this information, but we also encourage the public and other development professionals to read our evaluations. These can be very long and technical documents, so we try to make them easier to understand. To do so, we publish 4-page briefs highlighting the key points of each evaluation so that they are easily understood by a general audience. In addition to transparency, learning is also a core value for MCC. For example, we take this evaluation data generated about our programs and use it to inform our work in the future. If something didn't go as planned, we try to learn from it and to determine how we can do better next time. This constant learning and feedback loop would not be possible without data, and more importantly, analysis of that data. I share these examples from MCC because there are important parallels with the dig data challenges that have been taking place in Kosovo. They not only have encouraged the government of Kosovo institutions to publish more data and be more transparent, but the grantees have also taken this data and used it to create something of significant value to the public. The dig data solutions provide an important bridge between the government and the public by interpreting government data and using it in an innovative way that will resonate with people. Congratulations and thank you to all of the grantees for your creativity and dedication to open data, government transparency, and accountability. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, James. Indeed, you have been here 4 years ago at the onset when we launched this program, and now I'm very happy to see you here at the very end of these activities. Michael Davenport, Chief of Mission of OSCE in Kosovo, is also going to speak. OSCE has been working in Kosovo for many years, since the war ended actually, 24 years ago now, and did a lot of work on enabling democracy, responsiveness of the governance, institutions from all layers, not only electoral processes, but also enabling civil society to have its own say in developments. I thought it was very important, and we decided to invite Michael because to show that there is a certain continuity of international involvement, of cooperation, as well as present need to still have that collaborative effort between local landscape, the donors, and others who are keen to make the society more responsive and the government more transparent towards the citizens. So, Michael, the word is yours. Welcome.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Petrit, for inviting me to join you for this Millennium event, as you say, on behalf of the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the OSCE. And as you rightly say, the OSCE mission in Kosovo has over the years enjoyed excellent cooperation with you and with your team, and I congratulate you on the initiative and vision that you've shown specifically in launching the Dig Data Challenge. Dig Data, I think, reflects the Millennium commitment to creativity and innovation in tackling the manifold challenges that we all face. And your event shows, once again, the convening power that you have in bringing together the wide spectrum of people, bringing together civil society, but also, as we heard, government, the media, also private business, and including individuals who have the capacity to actually make changes happen and the ability to exert influence on both public and private sector policy making. So it seems from all I have heard that you've really created a first-class platform for promoting transparency, for enhancing accessibility of information which should be available to the public, and then also ensuring that it is clear and understandable. As we heard from the last speaker, that is a very high priority when they're often dealing with very complex data sets. And I think your initiative is also contributing in a very valuable way to raising awareness, whilst also boosting the availability of data for research purposes, the sharing of accurate information, as well as constructive public engagement on the issues of the day. And I would like to emphasise that this is also an area where the OSCE mission, not just the OSCE mission in Kosovo, but also the OSCE more widely, has been very deeply engaged. Enhancing public participation in decision and policy making is very much part of our mandate to build and consolidate democratic institutions. And transparency of information and accountability for decision making are essential elements in actually managing to do that. Since I came to Kosovo last year, I've been impressed by progress in this area, especially at municipal level. that it is in municipalities that many decisions are made which affect ordinary citizens most, including in areas covered by the Dig Data Challenge, and notably with regard to environment, energy and employment issues. I'd like just for a moment, if you'll allow me, to tell you a little bit about what the OSCE has been doing to exploit the potential of digital platforms and better information sharing with a view to improving service delivery, enhancing civic engagement and ultimately achieving more transparent and accountable governance. The OSCE mission is working on this in partnership with government bodies, including the Agency for Information Society, but also with municipal administrations throughout Kosovo and civil society. I think a great example of this have been what we call the digital platforms for public participation, which we've developed in cooperation with 5 municipalities in Pristina, Prizren, Jakova, Kamenica and Union. These platforms enable residents to share their ideas about their own neighbourhoods and discuss plans for improvements, but they also enable municipality staff to participate in discussions with residents and answer questions on municipal policies. Another initiative that I'm proud of from the OSCE side is the Kosovo Youth Platform, which has been designed to give young people better access to more reliable information about, for example, education and employment opportunities, as well as civic initiatives and events. This is a platform we've developed together with the Ministry for Culture, Youth and Sport and also the NGO, LEND, and it's growing and growing, and I'm sure will be ultimately handed over to the Ministry because that's probably the best way to ensure its long-term sustainability. Dig Data that you're engaged on is helping to promote more effective oversight of government by organisations and individuals outside government. And this external oversight is, if you like, one side of the oversight coin. The other side is made up of official bodies whose role it is to conduct such oversight and publish their findings and recommendations. And I'm thinking here, for example, of the Ombudsperson's Institution or the General Audit Office, whose role is about tracking adherence to human rights standards and proper budgetary practices. And of course there's the Information and Privacy Agency, which has a dual mandate to ensure proper public access to documents of public interest and at the same time to guarantee that individuals' privacy is not breached. And this is a core challenge. It always will be for all democracies in this region and elsewhere. And it does throw up one fundamental question among many others, but it's one which is very relevant, I think, to your discussion today. Namely, is there ever such a thing as too much transparency? In other words, how can we ensure that media, civil society, the general public hold government to account effectively, but without individual rights to privacy being breached? There was a reference to this earlier on. It's a painstaking exercise. And on the one hand, governments collect data on individuals, which is necessary, for example, for providing better services. But on the other hand, openness and transparency about government data help to build that very trust with the general public, which is so needed. So where do we draw the line here? This is not just something hypothetical. It's a challenge which societies everywhere have been grappling with, notably in tackling the pandemic, where health officials struggling to deal with COVID-19 have sometimes found themselves releasing the names, for example, of infected individuals. On some occasions, including in Kosovo, those names reached the media or the social media and became public. And the disclosure of names of those testing positive violated those individuals' right to privacy. This also had public health implications and acted as a deterrent in some cases to individuals getting tested, for example. But at the same time, aggregate data on infections, vaccinations, health system responses are absolutely vital for holding governments to account and improving public health responses. And I'm pleased to say there's actually a success story to report here in Kosovo, because the individuals concerned about the disclosure of their private health data were able to complain to the Ombudsperson's institution, which did take appropriate steps to prevent further such breaches. So public engagement with the government's own oversight mechanisms was able to have a positive impact. And at the same time, aggregated data continued to be made available to, for example, inform health sector responses and also contribute to research. And it seems to me that this is exactly how external and government oversight mechanisms should work together, acting effectively in the public interest. It seems to me that with DigData, you've very much struck the right balance, inviting external observers to explore patterns and trends emerging from properly prepared and anonymized data. And this has in turn helped to raise awareness of the enormous value to be derived from such data sets. So this is a boost at one and the same time, both for government accountability and the right to privacy. So the eye-catching news story in my public health example deserves to be not a list of individuals who tested positive for COVID, but rather it should be about a deep dive into health statistics, leading to striking regional and other comparisons and maybe highlighting possible discrepancies in performance or impact. So once again, a big thank you, Petrit and colleagues. Thank you to Millennium for this initiative in leveraging innovation and creativity when it comes to exploiting available data, while also helping to enhance transparency, accountability, and good governance. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Michael, for your very wide and deep explanation of how different initiatives are interconnected. Besoj edhe unë, besoj që dhe shumica juve që jeni këtu, dim se shpesh ndihemi se jemi në ishull, se ndoshta atje jashtë ka shumë njerëz që nuk janë të interesuar, nuk janë të përfshirë, nuk janë të angazhuar, po dijeni që për shumë ishull krijohet një arkipelago. Edhe në Kosovë megjithatë besoj se ka një arkipelago i fuqishëm i njerëzve të cilët janë të punuar në aktivizëm qytetar, të i përdor teknologjitë e reja, të interesuar ta bëjnë ndërlidhjen midis punës në hapjen e dhënave, në transparencë, në ngritjen e vetdijes, por edhe implementimit të projekteve ndryshimeve që kemi nevojë në shumë fusha të jetës, prej shëndetësisë deri te ndotjarit deri te fusha të tjera që kemi mbuluar. DigData është interesant si kartë të emni, të kjo logo e vogël ky digiti me lopat, se është digital data si shkurtesë, po është edhe dig, fjala angleze me gropu, se një pjesë është për me i gropu donat, me gjetë donat ku janë në shumësim e webfaqeve, PDF failave, por po ashtu me ato në farë punën e minjerës të nxjerrjes së dënave të përdoren, të kristalizohen dhe të shpërfaqen në mënyrë që të krijojnë solucione afatgjate për sfidat që kemi. Nga kjo DigData kanë dalë 4 vite projekte, edhe ju ftoj të shohim një film shumë shkurt rreth 4 raundeve të granteve, dhe pastaj fjalën do ta merr Gendiana Mahmuti Bajra, e cila ka menaxhuar dhe ta udhëheq panelin me disa nga pionerët Data Movers and Shakers, disa nga organizatat e kompanitë që kanë ndihmuar më shumti me grantet tona në ngritjen e vetdijes rreth rëndësisë të hapjes së dënave. Prandaj ju ftoj për filmin.
When MCC and the government country team first started working on the threshold program development, we found that there was a twofold problem. One, a lack of data. There were a lot of people collecting data, but it was not necessarily readily available, and that made it very hard to use. But two, it we found that it is very hard to find people who are using that data and demanding that data. And so the concept of the DigData program was really to bring together data providers and data users to make something bigger than itself. So data by itself is not useful. It is not useful until you transform it into information and into something that is actionable and something that is useful for the government or for whatever stakeholders.
The Girl Power Up project empowered girls from rural areas to stand up to social pressures and boosted their employability. The project offered career counseling, soft skills training, and internships for nearly 250 girls from 5 municipalities in Kosovo. 33 of these girls completed a 1-month internship, and 3 of them got employed before the training even finished.
We developed a solution that was around a question that we all have during our workday. What is the situation of workforce of tech industry in Kosovo? So we developed a solution called the Future Workplace. So I invite you all to dig further the data that we have opened.
It's a project which was funded under the small grant program of the first round of the DigData Challenge, and I can proudly say that it's still up and running and producing content, being used a lot by students and academia.
Tonë një Karina, dhe zbashku me Rezën e kemi fitu grantin DigData për cilësi të ajrit dhe këtë verë do ta lansojmë aplikacionin REA. Aplikacioni REA ka për qëllim të krijojë një hapësirë ku njerëzit mund të marrin informata të qarta dhe të besueshme, si dhe rekomandime personalizuara për ndikimin e cilësisë të ajrit në shëndet, si dhe rekomandime personalizuara dhe zgjidhje të thjeshta për mbrojtje të shëndetit.
Për më shumë se 2 vite kemi qenë të angazhuar në projektin për monitorimin e cilësisë së ajrit, ku çdo ditë kemi raportuar për cilësinë e ajrit në kohë reale. Asnjëherë më parë nuk është shfrytzuar gazetarija për me informuar qytetarët rreth cilësisë së ajrit. Kemi realizuar me 10 bulletine, me qindra lajme çdo ditë që janë publikuar për gjatë gjithë periudhës së implementimit të projektit.
Airbot është një robot I cili bën transmetimin e të dhënave të cilësisë së ajrit në tekst të kuptueshëm për të gjithë. Këtë bën duke bërë postime në rrjetet sociale si në Twitter dhe në Facebook, ku për ditën në të cilën bëhet postime tregon cilësia e ajrit si është, brenda ditës si dhe disa këshilla se si duhet të ruhen qytetarët e Kosovës nga cilësia e ajrit e asaj dite. Në kuadër të DigData Challenge të Millennium Foundation Kosova, ne kemi punuar në projektin Frima. Frima ka lindur si një nevojë e jashtëzakonshme për të pasur stacione monitoruese të ajrit në shtetin tonë. Gjatë periudhës së implementimit të këtij projekti, e cila ka qenë më shumë se 1 vjet, na e bashkangjitur më shumë se 200 nxënës dhe 50 mentorë. Për gjatë kësaj periudhe, nxënësit kanë volumtuar rreth kualitetit të ajrit në Kosovë, kanë fituar shkatësi teknike për montimin e këtyre stacioneve dhe në fund I kanë ndërtuar këto stacione me komponenta elektrik dhe me dizajnimin software të kutive. Platforma jonë online, frima.org, gjeneron të dhëna në kohë reale dhe ju mund të qaseni edhe në një aplikacion mobil gjithashtu.
One of the objectives of the Kosovo Open Data Challenge activity, besides the analytical use of judicial, environmental, energy, and labor force data, was to encourage cooperation between the civil society, government institutions, media, and academia. So as part of the Open Data Challenge process, the very first initial step that MFK took was to speak to the stakeholders, to line government agencies, to line ministries, to actually identify their needs. What type of data do they have? In what state the data is? And if the data is not in the format that is usable for the civil society for analysis, then assist them with our internal and external capacities to actually put that data into the format that would be used for the purpose of analyzing the data within the Kosovo Open Data Challenge activity. As a result of this cooperation between the government institution and grantees, most of the grantees have transferred the assets of their respective projects, as well as the solutions they created, to government agencies and other ministries that have cooperated on project implementation. And now these solutions are within the government institution, and the government is trained and capable to further maintain these solutions even after the MFK threshold project closes.
Our project aims to increase awareness about energy-efficient appliances in households, and with this we'd like to decrease the use of energy so we are more efficient in our households.
Our project Energometer aims to experiment with different tools in analyzing human behavior in energy consumption within households.
Our project is called Energy Stats. It will be a web visualization platform that will visualize main energy indicators and will also increase transparency and will help promote sustainable energy consumption through data.
We are Loop SMC and Cloud Solutions, and we are the team behind Loop docu-series, which will tackle the topics, everything related to energy.
We will develop the Kosovo Energy Production App, which in real time will expose the structure of energy production based on energy resources.
So, we have discussed what were the objectives of Dig Data competition, the national competition on open data challenges, but what are the outcomes of this activity of Millennium Foundation Kosovo supported by Millennium Challenge Corporation? There were a number of different types of projects. Some of them focused on how to ensure that public opinion understands better data-driven and data collection in promoting better and more transparent governance. Some projects were very concrete. For example, one NGO organized hardware and prepared hardware and software solutions so we have a better understanding of air pollution. Some of them did inside and in-depth studies on how best to use the data to reform a certain policy. We had a lot of trainings of young children, kids, young people. So various types of activities delivered various types of outcomes. What is clear though with DigDataKosovo is this is the first deliberate, explicit attempt, successful attempt I may say, of cooperation between civil society, institutions, private sector, and those institutions that create data. So we changed a little bit the understanding and the public dialogue, the public discourse, from finger pointing and sometimes too accusatory statements to more collaborative, data-driven activism and data-driven policy making.
As part of our project, we are going to fight fake news and misinformation by monitoring the media outlets in Kosovo, by providing hands-on trainings to young journalists, and by raising public awareness regarding the judicial system in Kosovo.
The project intends to increase the transparency and accountability of judges in the commercial department. It will also ensure that the judges, the new cohort of judges in the new commercial court will have a clear direction on the uniform practice of case law of the previous judgeship.
Through activism and journalism, we aim to give voice to men and women who fight for equality. Through visualization, one is not equal to one, as a digital platform will display cases of domestic violence with a focus on violence against women and femicide.
Për Përshëndetje. Projekti është Open Justice, I cili përdoj me mbledhjen e dhënave nga ana e prokurisë dhe gjykatave nga viti 2018 deri në vitin 2021. Dhe qëllimi I këtë kësaj është që me pas një matje të efikasitetit të punës së prokurisë dhe të gjykatave në trajtimin e landeve të ndryshme që lidhen me veprimtaritë penale.
Our project aims to increase the transparency of the judiciary and to simplify access to information for citizens. This will be achieved through media campaigns and legal advice. We will also conduct research about the severity of punishments in domestic violence cases, which we will also share with the wider public.
A project aims to tackle the sensationalist aspects of gender and domestic violence in the media and show how the reality really is based on the data, the way that the cases are solved.
So I think that is really the beauty of these open data challenges, not just creating something, an object, or a tool that comes out of one particular activity, but it creates a culture. And that was really the goal, to create a culture of data analysis, a culture of data sharing from the government, and to change the narrative a little bit from data users just using that data for being watchdogs, pointing out where things are done wrong, but take the next step and say, how do we all use this data together to make better decisions and to make better outcomes?
I think, Genta, it's your turn now. Genda will be leading a panel, so I'm hearing advice from. So yeah, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is a special occasion today to be celebrating the results of the 4-year work and the results of the DigData project. Today I will be leading the panel on big data initiatives, policies, applications to support Kosovo in enabling best practices in good governance. And as part of this panel, we will have some of the grantees under the Big Data Challenge and also some of the experts that have worked with us throughout the years to make these projects happen. So I will invite Ms. Jehona Gjujala from TOKA, Rin Fetohu from Bonevet, Albudina Shadi for BIR, Rezuarta Deliboa Shadi for Dita Dobronia, Mr. Adrian Bliss from Mott McDonald, and we have online Ms. Meredith Berry from USAID Innovations Lab. They were helping us from the very beginning, so it's my pleasure to have them as part of the panel today.
Would you say it there?
So once again, welcome. It is my pleasure today to be leading this panel with most of you. I have worked throughout the past years as part of the different challenges that you were grantees of. I would like to start with the very first challenge that we have implemented, the one on labor force and education data. So I'd ask Ms. Georgiala, since you have been one of the very first grantees of the DigData Challenge that covered the labor force participation topic, as part of your project, TOKA, your organization, provided training to young girls and also developed a training toolkit that was later transferred to the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology. I just want to acknowledge and highlight that we have the girls, some of the girls that have attended this training here. Thank you for taking part. I hope this project was helpful to you and to your further career development. Yehona, can you tell us more about how your initiative has made an impact on tackling the public information mismatch between labor force data and education data, and how these types of data-led initiatives can lead to changes in policies and better practices in good governance in general?
Hi everyone, thank you for your invitation. So 2 parts to the question. So the first one is, how did we use data to make a bridge between what the sort of the labor market needs and education, and then the component around partnerships with government and institutions. So for the first part, I don't know how many of you, I was actually in a meeting on Monday with the US Ambassador over here. He gathered a group of women CSO leaders to discuss the challenges around this topic, and one of my peers, in fact, Rizard, I was there, maybe you mentioned that only 2 out of 10 women in Kosovo are employed. So there's a data point for you that Sarah was saying data doesn't speak for itself, but I think that one maybe does. So how do you shift the needle on this? And what we did was look into data through a number of sources, but also in particular looking at the Labor and Time Use Survey that was in fact one of the original sort of outputs of MFK. And what we found was that skills are an issue, but attitudes, in fact, are potentially a much bigger issue. For women, especially for women from, let's say, disadvantaged backgrounds, poor socioeconomic backgrounds, from rural areas, from provincial towns. And we basically use that data and that insight to build an education program that wasn't just focused on skill building, but also on attitude building, and in particular resilience towards social pressures. So one of the data points that we found as we were looking at how to design the right intervention was there were a number of questions in the survey where the respondents were asked, if you had limited amount of money, would you send a boy or a girl to university? And guess what the answer was most of the time. There were similar type of classic gender stereotyping responses, and what was striking was also that the women tended to be even more conservative than the men. And this is something that we've also found through other programs, that often the women unfortunately tend to hold back other women, and that's a big challenge. So when we looked at all this data and this insight, we then built an education program that worked on developing skills, but also worked a lot on building this resilience in girls, understanding a lot more about their passions and interests, understanding what are their values, who are the important people in their life, how are they helping or hindering their ambitions and the achievement of their potential. And as a result of that, in some areas really we exceeded our own targets in terms of outcomes. So the program was built sort of as a sort of funnel of a general training once a week in the schools where the girls were going to school, in a high school, in villages, in 5 municipalities in Kosovo, and then a subset of them was offered the opportunity to do an internship, and we exceeded the target for the number of girls that wanted to do an internship. And roughly it was 300 participants, 30 internships, and by the end of the program that we know of, 3 girls were already employed. And what happens 3 years after the program? Some of the girls here maybe might tell. The second part, which is around sort of the culture shift or the governance sort of elements of working with the government and institutions. I think part of it, honestly, is that I don't know whether we were unlucky. I think a lot of people who worked in 2018 to 2021 with our various central governments would say that it was a very difficult time to work. There was a lot of changes, turnover, the relationships were built and then they were gone. So I would like for us to say that we made a greater impact than we maybe have at the central government level. They did the bare minimum, I would say, unfortunately, but where it has been pleasantly surprising is that at the local government level, there is a lot, there are enough good municipalities now that want to do good work, that you can find them and work with them. And there is definitely a shift. As well as, you know, I know a school and a principal is not considered government, but it is an institution, and it is actually the closest institution that most participants have. So this is actually what I would say our experience was, where you can make, in fact, some very, very tangible and durable influence. Hope that's not too long.
Thank you, Yehona. I think your remarks give enough food for thought for the donor community that we have here, but also the representatives of government institutions. I mentioned that you have transferred the toolkit to the Ministry of Science, Education and Technology. I would just like to know, as a follow-up question, how did that cooperation go, and whether that toolkit is still being in use and considered by MEST when developing certain curricula?
I will answer it very briefly because I already just had, in fact. The toolkit has been published in the Ministry of Education's website as a resource, as an educational resource. We don't have the data, how much that is being used either by third parties. My sense is from the interactions I've had with the Ministry over the last few years that let's say they're working on a different strategy. It doesn't have to do with this particular project, but it has to do with, let's say, a different approach. So I would leave it at that at this point.
Thank you, Yevona. As part of the air quality challenge, the second challenge that was implemented, we have Ms. Rim Fetaho from Banevet organization. Banevet's project included equipment distribution to participating schools, workshops to introduce the challenge and equipment, building stations, measuring air quality, and produce data. We have heard about it even on the documentary, so it gave you a sense of what the project was mainly consisting of. Could you please let us know more about the project in general, how this cooperation with high school students went? I know we have a few high school students attending the event here today as well. And how early advocacy and increased awareness in youngsters through trainings like the one you provided can lead to helping these youngsters make more informed decisions and bring changes to the community in the future.
Okay, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Since we saw the video, it's easier to also explain the sensors and how it was built, but generally the project started as an idea of combining education, technology, and awareness, and we thought that the best group to work with was the high schoolers. We have worked with 35 high schools around Kosovo in 22 municipalities, and we have had a large number of 200 students and mentors who have worked with us for a very long period of time. With the pandemic in the last 2 years, with the ups and downs, we have had a group of students who were committed to not only dig data, but also to generate their own. The project was separated in 3 phases. One was the educating. We've mentioned many times that the data is there sometimes, but you need to know how to use it and present it. So our students were taught to research, to learn about air quality first, to get the education component. And after they did that, we did the equipment distribution. The kits, the orange kits that you may have seen in the video, they were all built by the students. They worked with Arduino kits and sensors that they made in their own schools with guidance from Banevet and their school mentors. They researched, they saw what they need to be done, and they gained technical skills. The importance of this was that the technical skills is also combined with the teamwork they developed while doing that, because they worked in teams, they were 4 to 5 students per schools, and they had to solve all these challenges, what we call them creative challenges, throughout years. And then, in the end, they continued to also learn 3D printing and design, where they designed the famous orange kits. They are all 3D printed with the help of Bonnevet, so they did it themselves, like Bonnevet, and then they put these sensors in their schools, which generate even now data for the air quality. I know that air quality was more of a hot topic before, and then the pandemic kind of took over, but I think it's also time to rebring that discussion and talk, because now at Bonnevet we have the platform Përmbyllja, and you can download it also as an app on Android and iOS, where you can find this data from students, from their schools, that is being generated daily. And now, because we've been talking about it, because we just launched the platform 2 months ago, and we use the app, we see that actually the air quality most of the time is not good, but we have been focusing on other stuff recently, and now it's like, okay, we have had these students who have, even us that work directly with this project, somehow forgot they have raised awareness for us, and let alone what they did for the communities. It's very important to mention that once they build this, they work with their teachers, they work with their directors, but also I'm sure that if the students see that there's a sensor somewhere, they will be curious to know what happened and what is being done. And in terms of having the data open for the public, all data that's being generated can be all found in Përmbyllja, but they also can track the data. We have the weekly data that's being launched every time, and then even after a year, to make data-driven decision, students will continue to analyze that data and see where and what areas should be done more improvement. And also we have 22 municipalities being covered, which means we can also see in which areas the situation is worse and in which areas maybe we should learn from. We also had great cooperation with schools. As Johanna said, they are very important institutions. They were very cooperative. And in a sense of sustainability, what's important to mention is that the sensors that they built, I hope it's not too technical, but it has possibilities to add other sensors to measure even other particles. So then not only all the air is bad today, we can go out, but there's going to be other information that's going to be launched that will help the decisions to be made in their communities. And to mention, also the students did a lot of activities, extracurricular activities to raise awareness in their communities. So that's kind of the wrap-up of the project.
Thank you, Rina. We will have the chance, as part of the second panel, to hear from students themselves, and we'll see how they found this project interesting and how it changed their awareness towards the issue of air quality in general. As part of the Judicial DigData Challenge, we have Ms. Dita Dobronia, who is one of the grantees. And her project aims to build a continuously updated platform which provides information on the overall cases of gender-based violence. Dita, would be glad to hear from you, how does data mapping and disaggregation lead to increased transparency of the judicial system in general when it comes to gender-based violence cases? And how can similar platforms, like the one you are developing, inform the public better on cases and what's happening in this aspect?
Thank you, Genta. It's a pleasure to be here and to hear about such amazing and inspiring projects. We're still in the development phase, as Genta mentioned, but in terms of how can open and disaggregated data lead to better transparency and ultimately to more accountability, whenever you look at manuals of open data and how to use open data, there are a couple of recipes for success that are mentioned. So the right data needs to be published in the right format, but I think one of the most important things that was mentioned here today, first by Sarah in her speech, but then it was elaborated even further by other panelists, is that data itself doesn't speak. So we need to make the data speak, we need to make sense of the data. So what we're trying to do with our platform is to take the data that has been published through the MFK call first, and to make sense of it a little bit more, to show the general public, but also to target the media and the institutions, to see where there are some kind of patterns, for example. We're focusing on gender-based violence because it is a very important topic. It is something that is very close to our hearts as a team working on this, but also we believe that it is something that needs to be tackled and something that there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of disinformation around it. We've seen cases of gender-based violence and a lot of cases ending in fatalities in the past years. And every time there's a case happening, there's chatter, people discuss it, and then it dies down a couple of days later, or in the more recent times, a couple of hours later. People then tend to become cynical about the data that is published, about the information that they have, because there's not a very good way of them understanding this data. There's a misconception of the links, for example, of the cases that are reported to the police, to the cases that go to the judicial system, which level of the judicial system they go to, what kind of cases are being treated, how are they being treated, are they being abandoned by the people who are pursuing the cases, or are they just taking too long in the backlog of the judicial cases that we have. So with our platform, we're trying to do this, to go through the clutter and then make it a little bit more understandable for the general public, for the media, for the academia, the students, for everyone to understand these cases. The disaggregation is really important because what we've seen with an initial look at the data is that there are certain municipalities, for example, in which there's a higher backlog. If the data that is published by the judicial system, for example, even if it's coded, they can code the data in a way that we know, for example, who's responsible for which cases, what kind of decisions they're making. And in countries across the world, not just in domestic violence cases, but overall judicial cases, these kinds of projects have been very successful in finding out if there's a pattern, for example, of a judge being biased towards one type of case than another, or recommending certain solutions to cases that are not necessarily in the best interest of all parties. So we believe that by initiating this platform, and then hopefully we will continue to have partnerships and continue to work on the platform as we go along, we believe that we can highlight really important issues and come up with patterns and see things that are not necessarily visible when you look at these cases just at face value. I believe that this, what we're trying to do with our platform, then can be replicated in other sectors, in other areas in which they can. I mean, we are more than happy to work with whoever wants to collaborate in trying to shed light and be a little bit more transparent, but not necessarily just transparent, but raise accountability as well in terms of the cases that are being handled.
Thank you, Dita. As you mentioned, the ability to disaggregate data and having data disaggregated on the platforms and even on the websites of government institutions, especially judicial data, is of utmost importance. One of the good things that I want to highlight is that we're working as part of another project of the Public Access to Judicial Information project. We're working with helping the Kosovo Judicial Council and Prosecutorial Council open more data through the case management information system that they have. It's an internal tool, but through the modules that we're adding, we're going to make an open data platform that would be fed from the data that is internally available to courts and prosecution offices. And also then people will have the ability to track their own cases through the case tracking mechanism. So there will be a lot to work on in the field of judicial data very soon.
If I can just add one more thing, because unfortunately I apologize, I will have to leave a little bit early. But one of the things that we will do with the platform is we will also develop these step-by-step on how to use the data that is published in the platform. Because again, there's plenty of data out there, but a lot of times people don't know how to make sense of it. They don't know how to combine the data that is published. So what we're going to try to do with our platform is just have people understand what kind of data they're playing around with. They will be able to generate their own graphs, their own infographics for their use. which will then be published through different platforms. But we will help them understand how to use this data, because I think that is another crucial part in data, in understanding data, that is that people need to know how to use the data and how to make sense of it. So we need to make the data make sense a little bit more.
Sitting next to Dita, we have Ms. Rezorta Delibasha from the D4D Institute. They're one of the grantees of the Judicial Data Challenge, and they're co-implementing their projects with the Balkan Investigative Reporting Network, and we have Ms. Alpulina as a representative of Bern here on the panel today. Ms. Delibasha, one of the fields that your organization is working on is good governance and public interest, by bridging the gap between public institutions and promoting good governance. Do you believe that initiatives such as the DigData Challenge are a good mechanism to ensure greater institutional transparency and accountability? And if so, why?
Në fakt, nuk mundem me fillu me u përgjigj, pa ju tregu që po ndjehemi që në fund po ndoj një panel me gra të organizatave të cilat i përfaqësojnë që nuk po diskutojmë për mirëqenien sociale, shëndetësinë, arsimin, po jemi duke diskutuar për disa të dhëna të cilat na ndihmojnë neve për që nuk është shumë e zakonshme kjo, jemi shumë zakonshme pa në panel e krejt burra që po diskutojnë të dhëna të cilat në jetë në çdo ditë e prekin jetën tonë. Ne si Demokraci për Zhvillim, si që përmende në programin tonë Qeverisja dhe Interesi Publik, mundohemi sa më shumë me përafru qeverisjen, institucionet e ndryshme tek qytetarët, përmes mekanizmave të ndryshme që implementojmë si organizat, ku njëra nga këto, që besoj që një pjesë e madhe e qytetarëve i dinë sallonet e smartës, ku janë diskutime ku i takojmë institucionet me qytetarë, ku është dera e parë që ata munden me tregu se çfarë po i përshtat apo çfarë jo me vendimet e qeverisë. Ndërsa të dhënat, që si organizat i kemi pas problem, zakonisht institucionet të dhënat i plasojnë në mënyrë PDF, që është problem ti me përpunu dokumentin, me përpunu të dhënat, me përpunu numrat, andaj cila do platformë, besoj po është përmes këtij programi mjaft shumë kemi platforma tani, të cilat i kanë hapur të dhënat e institucioneve të ndryshme, të cilat janë të analizueshme dhe të përpunueshme nga ana jonë. Nëse marrim një të dhënë të parë për regjistrimin e popullsisë Kosovës, e shohim që është shumë problem të me marrë dhe me përpunu këtë dhënën, nga mënyra se siç është paraqitur për institucionet. Andaj përmes këtij projektit e kemi parë që institucionet janë të hapura për bashkëpunu, është e rëndësishme mënyra se si i qasemi dhe mënyra pastaj se si ne rrisim besimin tek qytetarët për institucionin. Sa i përket projektit që jemi duke implementuar bashkë me Birnin, kemi vërejtur që një pjesë e mirë të dhënave dhe analizave që janë bërë deri më tani nuk kanë qenë të bazuara kryesisht në të dhëna analitike, kur kanë marrur pjesë aktorë të ndryshëm apo analistë për debate të ndryshme. Andaj ne jemi munduar që të mbajmë trajnime edhe forumeve të rinjve të partive politike, të cilët janë politikanë të arshëm dhe të mësojmë bazat e para se si të përdorin të dhënat për diskutime publike. Gjithashtu të njëjtën e kemi bërë edhe me gazetarët e rinj, të cilët do të jenë në tregun e punës, për të treguar bazën e shfrytëzimit të dhënave. Sa më të lehtë kemi qasjen në të dhëna, aq më e lehtë është ne si ulitse mes qytetarëve dhe institucioneve të krijojmë këtë urë bashkëpunimi, aq më i hapur institucioni dhe aq më transparent. Sa më shumë i kemi të dhënat në përpunim, tregohet që institucione vendimet po i merr bazuar në kërkesat e qytetarëve për t'i adresuar këto dhe në të njëjtën kohë është më transparent dhe më i hapur.
Faleminderit shumë Rezarta. Është vërtet që institucionet edhe mduhet me tekstu këto se kom qene e kyçur qysh prej fillimit, domethënë kur është dizajnuar komplet Open Data Challenge. Shumë shpesh edhe institucionet qeveritare kanë vullnet me i hap të dhënat. Po duhet me theksu që shpesh nuk kanë kapacitete njerëzore, nuk kanë kapacitete teknologjike, edhe kjo rrjedhimisht çon te ndoshta edhe plasimi i informatave në webfaqe ose kudo që i publikojnë në formatin jo të duhur. Edhe këtu na e kemi pa si pikë shumë të rëndësishme bashkëpunimin e shoqërisë civile me institucionet në jo vetëm them përdorimin e të dhënave të hapura, po shpesh kur shoqëria civile ka kapacitete të brendshme me ndihmu institucionin me i hap të dhënat, kemi avoku me u bë një gjë e tillë. Kështu që është shumë mirë ajo që e përmendet edhe tek sud se bashkëpunimi mes këtyre tre aktorëve, shoqërisë civile, sektorit privat dhe qeverisë është kyç në mënyrë që informata me u përqu në mënyrë të duhur te publiku, se në fund të fundit për një qytetar të Kosovës, po edhe për mua, nuk jam eksperte e statistikave, është me rëndësi që qaj numër me pas një kuptim, me mu paraqit në mënyrë vizuale, në atë mënyrë që une e kuptoj çka do me thonë ky numër. As part of the panel, we also have Ms. Arbelina Sadiko from BIRN, the one organization that's co-implementing the project with the speaker that we just heard of. Arbelina, as I said, you're co-implementing this project with D4D. As part of this activity, you are launching a database for easier access to fact-based information related to the judicial system, cases, and regulations in general. As a journalist, how do you think this contributes to greater transparency and how it affects the course of reporting by journalists on judicial cases?
Faleminderit në qanë, po vazhdoj në gjuhën shqipe me qenë se shumica audiencës shqipfalës. Po, ky projekt zbatohet në bashkëpunim me BIRN-et, D4D-s, Internews Kosova dhe Fajnbag. Kemi kombinu përvoja të ndryshme me target grupe të ndryshme, në mënyrë që dhënat cilat janë lansur realisht prej MFK-s të arrijnë te grupe të ndryshme, qoftë institucioneve, po trive, gazetarëve, e gjithashtu edhe përfituesve të shërbimeve të gjyqësore. Çka ndoshta është shumë specifike për këtë projekt është që BIRN-i edhe organizatat partnerët të këtij projekti njihen kryesisht për gazetari volumtuese, gazetari analitike, që kryesisht tenton t'i ekspozoj problemet të metat dhe t'i adresoj ato në institucionet publike, ndërsa në këtë projekt specifik ne kemi realisht pilotu një metodë të re të punës që quhet ridrejtimi i audiencës apo redirect method, që ka për qëllim realisht audiencës e cila është përdoruse e dhënave të gjykatës t'ju ofrojë edhe rezultate pozitive. Në kuptimin që përpas materialeve që lexohen nëpër media, për problemet apo sfidat me cilat përballet gjyqësori, në të njëjtën kohë t'ju ofrojnë dhëna edhe për rezultatet e mira të punës që janë arrit. Kjo po bëhet përmes një platforme realisht e cila i krahason të dhënat e marra prej KGK-s, PPK-s dhe Agjencisë për Ndihmë Juridike Falas, në rastet të sulmeve ndaj gazetarëve, rasteve të që kanë të bëjnë me pjesëtarët e komunitetit LGBTI, e gjithashtu dhe rastet e efikasitetit të mekanizmave speciale, që shëmë për shembull prokuroria apo departamenti special i gjykatave. Çka kemi bërë, na përveç përdorimit të dhënave që janë bërë publike, na evitu mbledh gjatë kohës në baza mujore edhe dhëna shtesë prej gjykatave të Kosovës dhe po i publikojmë ato me numra shumë specifik. Numri i viteve që janë realisht dhënë si dënime për gjykatave, po dhe gjitha llojet e dënimeve për vepra penale në gjykatat të Kosovës. Kjo është bërë realisht me dy qëllime kështu në mendje, e para për me ngrit realisht transparencën edhe llogaritën e gjykatave, po edhe në anën tjetër me shërbyer si masë edukuese për qytetarët që këto janë pasojat e veprave penale që mund të bëhen. Na gjithashtu kemi vërejtë që shpesh të mjafton që vetëm një medium ose një organizat me punu me dhëna dhe me përdor dhënat për me raportu në mënyrë me fakte të verifikume për gjykatave, kështu që kemi vendosur me punë edhe me studentë dhe me gazetarë të mediave tjera, disa prej cilëve janë këto, përveç trajnimeve edhe bursave në mënyrë që realisht edhe në mediumet tjera apo edhe në gjenerata të reja të gazetarëve juristëve ketë realisht njohuri edhe aftësi se si të përdoren në dhënat. Gjithashtu, nështë si pike fundit për neve, realisht krejt organizatat partnere, është me rëndësi që të cekët që shumë shpesh, sidomos në për media, po edhe në diskutime maja formale mes organizatave jo qeveritare, edhe politikanve, apo njerëzve në pushtat që opozitë, se shpesh ndrojnë rolet, flasim në mënyrë me narrativat e tilla të cilat në fakt e dëmtojnë perceptimin e qytetarëve për gjyqësorin, por edhe në të njëjtën kohë e dëmtojnë realisht besimin e qytetarëve për me mujt me raportu raste që i kanë në gjykata. Kështu që kjo platformë është kriju pikërisht për këtë qëllim, që në rast që një qytetar dëshiron të raportojë një rast të caktuar në prokurori, polici, me një search të thjesht në Google, realisht shumica rasteve që i dalin janë kishuj negative. Kjo platformë që ka po tenton me bu, është në rast që kërkohen për shembull raste të zgjidhura për gjykatave, ose një palë kërkon ta shesë çka kanë bërë gjykatat, prokuroria për raste të dhunës në familje, për shembull, të shihet realisht që ka raste shumë që janë zgjidhur ose ka raste që janë tu trajtu. Kështu që kjo thjesht më ton ti inkurajoj qytetarët që t'i besojnë institucionave publike në të njëjtën kohë, por edhe në anën tjetër përmes debateve publike, televizive, ta ngrisë presionin qytetar te gjyqtarët, prokurorët edhe mekanizmat e tjerë të drejtësisë që t'i marrin seriozisht rastet e raportimit të qytetarëve dhe t'i zgjidhin në mënyrë efikase, transparente, po dhe llogaritëse.
Faleminderit Armulina, është shumë që përmendet çështjen e perceptimit. Shumë shpesh perceptimi i përgjithshëm i publikut me realitetin ndonjëherë nuk po përkon me po ashtu që qëndron e vërteta. Edhe një prej arsyeve, domethënë, pse në këtë rast është mirë me u bazu në dhëna, se fokusojmë debatin nga gojëdhënat, më të thash, dëgjova në atë se çka thojnë numrat edhe çka është realiteti. I'm going to thank the grantees for highlighting the main pillars, let's say, of their projects, and I'm going to switch a bit the course of this panel. On my right side, I have Mr. Adrian Bliss. Welcome, Adrian, from Mott MacDonald. Adrian has been engaged with MCC and MFK in providing advice, guidance, and recommendations to DigData grantees implementing projects in the energy efficiency field. We don't have sitting here today in the panel any of the grantees, unfortunately, from the Energy Efficiency Challenge. However, I believe that myself and also the audience would like to hear your impressions on the capacities of Kosovo's civil society organizations and private sector, mainly those that you have worked with, to work with energy efficiency data and promote behavior change from what you have seen through the course of supervision of these projects. And if possible, could you give us some examples on how data and digital innovation can lead to business opportunities and improving social outcomes in general?
Yeah, thanks, Junta. And it's a pleasure to be here. It's been an honour and a privilege to work with the energy efficiency grantees over the last few months and on the wider threshold programme over the last 3 years it is now. And there's a few more years to come on the compact programme as well, so I'll get to know Kosovo even better than I already do. I mean, firstly, I'd have to say I've been incredibly impressed by all the grantees I've had the pleasure to work with. The professionalism, the passion, the energy and the drive and motivation has been a real eye-opener, and it's been really noticeable. In terms of civil society here, I think it's as an active civil society as I've seen anywhere, with citizens really engaged over a range of topics, not just on the ones that we've talked about today and in the energy sector, but across a number of sectors. So that's also been very impressive from my point of view. I want to say a little bit more about the 5 energy efficiency grantees that I've been working with a little bit more closely, and although they got a brief introduction earlier, I'd like to say a few words about each of them. So I'll start with Loop, who developed a 6-part docu-series talking about energy and energy efficiency and renewable energy and the history of energy in Kosovo, which was all incredibly well researched. but the production quality and the overall, I don't know, the slickness of the production, I think you know, you could show those anywhere, and that'd be fit for an international audience. So the footage, everything from the footage gathered to the fact finding, and of course the use of data and the way it was presented was very impressive. The Institute for Free Market Economy developed a carbon intensity application which is incredibly forward-thinking, as are a lot of the initiatives. I think as we go forward 5 or 10 years in Kosovo's journey in the energy sector, a lot of these initiatives will still be really relevant, and as Kosovo's energy mix continues to diversify, we hope, and based on the recently launched energy strategy, it looks like that will be the case. But for citizens to be able to monitor the carbon intensity and understanding and knowing where their energy is coming from and how much carbon it's actually utilising, and then how it changes over time and actually how it can change, I think is really interesting and will be a really useful tool going forward. I was also impressed by Space Syntax Energometer, which was talked about earlier very briefly, and I should also add that the diversity of ideas was incredibly impressive. You know, as James mentioned, there were over 100 applicants, and it's a shame to have to disappoint so many. But even with, I know, but yeah. So again, very diverse ideas, and very entrepreneurial as well. So Space Syntax set up a building, Building Zero, which aimed to clearly demonstrate to the passing public and anyone who logged on how energy was being used, and sort of created a bit of competition between apartments in the building. And I wondered, what if we scaled this up, and what if we took it into other sectors? What if we did it for hotels and office buildings and other types of buildings, shopping malls and so on, where energy usage is absolutely enormous? And then the business opportunity that would come on the back of that, well, if you could save a shopping mall or a hotel or an office building, even government offices, if you could start to save them hundreds or thousands of dollars every year on their energy bills, just by increasing awareness and making subtle changes, well, that's probably quite a good opportunity. And it's you know, a repeatable proposition that you could take from one sector to another. The Procon group were promoting energy efficient appliances, and it's clear that this is an underrepresented area in Kosovo. I think the initiative to get out and educate retail professionals so they can then inform their customers, so that they understand that they can save energy and they can save money in the long term. I thought that was really impressive. I think what recent experience tells us is that energy costs are always going to go up. It's unlikely they're going to come down. So if you buy an appliance that's going to last for 5, 10, 20 years, maybe you need to know how much energy it's going to consume and what it might cost. And then finally, Women in Data Kosovo, who have done an incredibly good job of deciphering very complex data and making it easily digestible and accessible for a range of societal sectors. So, you know, very simply for customers so they can save money on their bills, for media and so on, so they can actually use the data to create content that's useful for consumers, and also to provide materials for driving the policy agenda as well. So I thought that was also really interesting. So, you know, a really impressive and interesting and diverse and entrepreneurial range of initiatives that I got a bit closer to.
Thank you, Adrian. I believe that what you just have recapped, one of the things that I would like to highlight from this discussion is that we do really have CSOs, representatives of private sector and youngsters who have very good ideas on how to tackle certain problems, being it in the field of energy efficiency, labor or air quality. So a good recommendation coming from this panel, we would all agree, is that big data initiatives and open data initiatives in general, and incentivizing the civil society, being it through funds or through capacity building is a good tool to further promote this creativity of the CSOs and support changes in the community. Last but not least, we have Meredith Berry from USAID Innovations Lab online. We have worked with Meredith from the very beginning when the Kosovo Open Data Challenge portfolio was being designed. Meredith, thank you for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you as part of the panel.
It's a delight to see and celebrate the Kosovo Open Data Challenges come full circle. I'm overjoyed to be here.
You've been part of assisting Millennium Foundation Kosovo. Maggie, who's there in the back and whom I want to thank for her support and the entire work that she has done as part of this portfolio. So you've been assisting us in the initial design phase and then identification of topics of interest, the 4 areas that we came up with and the questions that we addressed. The application process in general, matchmaking between government partners and CSOs or private sector, and implementation side as well. Can you let us know why innovation open data challenges are beneficial to be implemented from your perspective? And why is it important to have cooperation, co-implementation, and knowledge transfer between civil society organizations, private sector, and government, a relationship that we as the team who has worked on the Open Data Challenge has been advocating strongly and so much about?
Certainly. So, open innovation competitions like the DigData Challenges display a humility that we, and I say this as a civil servant myself, don't know all the answers. And government being willing to display this kind of humility and see the initiative and power to develop activities that not only address the problem, but change power dynamics and create public trust is just vital to this broader culture that the Millennium Foundation Kosovo and its partners have been seeking to shift. A culture of more transparent and accountable governance and citizens who not only understand the problems that their country is facing, but attack them in a data-driven way. And that's where data comes in. Open data efforts represent another kind of humility, and they represent the government being willing to open their books and records for public scrutiny, interrogation, and understanding. And they demonstrate this willingness to show that government is not the sole expert or arbiter of information. And so when we put them together, these open data, open innovation challenges, they're an opportunity for civil society, academia, the private sector, and passionate problem solvers to highlight new or neglected patterns, to turn that data that Sarah has been reminding us over and over again into information, and to pose solutions and build a case, whether that's a business case or a public policy case for change. And we see this here today in the vision and the results of organizations like Fonavet, TOCA, Data Against Domestic Violence, D4D, and BEARN. But the challenges that Kosovo and other places around the world face are so big that it's not enough to tackle them alone. I think we put too much faith in a single innovator to be able to transform the world when we know that policy and regulation and investment also play a critical role in making change. And so first, the DigData team made sure that the government not only agreed that the problems that we were pursuing were worthwhile, but that the data was there to make that case. So we worked hand in hand with representatives from Kosovo's government and with civil servants to identify key issues and the data to address them where everyone could agree that innovation was needed. And then we brought innovators and the government together to ensure that both were successful. So Adrian alluded to this earlier, but the pro-con group, the innovators selected as part of the Energy Data Challenge, first, they used data provided by the Energy Regulatory Office to identify that one of the biggest obstacles to reducing energy consumption was energy efficient appliances. And they proposed using tax incentives to reduce the price of energy efficient appliances. But to get these incentives in place, they needed to collaborate with the government to get value-added taxes cut to reduce those prices. And this is just one small example of the virtuous cycle that open data competitions fostered by working with government to release data, using the data to inspire innovative solutions, working with the government to implement the innovative solution, and then consulting new data to see if the solution worked as intended. And so it's these virtuous cycles that the Dig Data Challenges sought to incentivize, and we hope continue long after the program concludes.
Thank you, Meredith. I would also like to thank all the other panel members for such a fruitful discussion. And back in the audience, since I said we have students, women that attended the training, and then journalists, I believe that this panel and the remarks given on this panel served you to get enough information on the importance of data, on advocacy, etc. So I truly hope, since you have been engaged partly as indirect beneficiaries of this project, that in the future you will be the ones sitting in similar panels and making changes to the community in general.
Hello. Thank you. Hello. So we have a very short break before we move to the last interactive online, offline panel, in which we will hope to get some of the inputs from the students, from the teachers involved in the projects implemented by some of our grantees. So to ensure a smooth transition, technical, I invite you to have a bit of a rest for everybody, for a coffee or a cup of tea before the continuation, and then we also have a dinner for all the participants here, organized by us after we end the actual event. So ju kështu të gjithëve për një kafe apo çaj, pak një pushim të vogël para se të vazhdojmë panelin interaktiv me studentët, pjesëmarrësit të tjerë, arsimtarët, ndërsa natyrisht jemi ftuar edhe për darkën e përbashkët që kemi në fare